So sit back as we go to Wales. Mahmood Hussein Mattan was born in British Somaliland in 1923. At the time of his birth, the East African country was a British protectorate. Today, British Somaliland does not exist and is part of Somalia. People from there had been arriving in Britain to take advantage of the better employment opportunities since the late 19th century, and this increased during the First World War, when many young men arrived, mainly to work on the Navy ships. During the Second World War, Mahmood found work as a merchant seaman, and at some point, his ship arrived in the Welsh capital, Cardiff, where there was already a quite large Somalian community, consisting mainly of hard-working young men. He was offered employment, so decided to stay in Wales, settling in the Tiger Bay area of the city. This was between the city centre and the docks, and was a very diverse community, with workers from over 50 different countries. Despite the different backgrounds and languages, it became a distinct and happy neighbourhood, where the people would mix and socialise together, all sharing the same hope of trying to build a better future for themselves. In 1945, Mahmood met a young 17-year-old girl named Laura Williams. She worked in a paper factory and lived in a working-class area of the city. Mahmood and Laura soon started to go out, but she was worried that her parents would disapprove of her having a relationship with an immigrant from British Somaliland. So at first, the couple kept their relationship a secret. They did not, however, keep it a secret for long, as 3 months after meeting, Mahmood Hussein Mattan and Laura Williams were married. At the time, there was a lot of prejudice against interracial marriages, and the couple suffered both verbal and physical abuse when out together in the shops and in the streets. Although the Tiger Bay community provided a good social network, the couple were unable to find accommodation together. Unfortunately, there was no anti-discrimination legislation to prevent landlords from refusing to accept non-white tenants, and this resulted in Mahmood and Laura living in separate houses. Eventually, they became fed up with their situation and moved to Hull in England. Life here was more bearable, and although they still experienced some prejudice, in general, the people seemed more tolerant towards their relationship. The economic growth in the country had become so rapid that by 1950, many cities were experiencing labour shortages. This led to a big increase in immigration to help with the employment market, and everyone started to become more accustomed to people from all over the world living and working in the country. Hull was not dissimilar to Cardiff, as it also had a very busy port, and there was plenty of work for hard-working and conscientious people such as Mahmood. Laura, however, missed her family, and when the company for whom Mahmood worked laid off staff, they decided to return to Wales. By this time, the couple had 3 children, but were still unable to find a landlord who would rent them a room. So Laura and the children lived in a house in Davis Street, which was outside the Tiger Bay area. Here she continued to experience some hostility from her neighbours, many of who disapproved of her marriage. Mahmood lived in the same street. He rented a room in a house that he shared with other immigrant dock workers. He was a proud, ambitious man who wanted his family to prosper, and despite all the prejudice he suffered, he was keen to improve his circumstances and live with his wife and children in a nice house in a good neighbourhood. Lily Volpert was a 41-year-old spinster who owned a small outfitter's shop in Bute Street, close to Cardiff docks. She was also known to be an unofficial moneylender. At around 8:15 p.m. on Thursday the 6th of March 1952, the body of a lady was found in the shop. She had received injuries to her throat, consistent to it being cut with a razor, and £100 had been stolen. The body was soon identified to be that of Lily Volpert. The police arrived at the scene. They observed the deceased and noted that there was no murder weapon nearby. There was, however, a significant amount of blood, which would mean that the perpetrator would have undoubtedly have left the shop with bloodstained clothing. They questioned witnesses, The deceased's mother and sister told them that Lily normally closed the shop at 8 p.m, but would see customers later if they needed her assistance. Customers knew, but if they required anything, they just needed to ring the doorbell. The police wondered if the crime may have been committed by someone who was working on one of the many ships that were currently in Cardiff docks, so ordered that no ships be allowed to leave. They started to work out a timeline and soon established that Lily had last been seen alive in her shop at around 8 p.m, when she was assisting 2 female customers. When questioned, one of them said that she had seen a dark-skinned man with a moustache in and around the shop at the time that they were there. A young lady who lived nearby told the police that she left her home at 8 p.m on the 6th of March and walked to the community centre. On her way, she had seen Lily Volpert standing in the doorway, as if she was about to close. They spoke for a minute before the young girl continued on. Another man told them that he had driven past her shop at about 8:17 p.m. and saw there were lights on, and noted that the door was partly open. The man who found the body had arrived at the police station at 8:28 p.m, so with this information, the police established that the murder occurred at some time between 8 and 8:20 p.m. All they needed to do now was find the person responsible. They were quick to start their inquiries and began knocking on the doors of houses in the area and visiting people already known to them. One person who they visited was Mahmood Hussein Mattan, who lived at 42 Davies Street. He told them that he had been at the cinema until 7:30 p.m. and then came back to his house. The police searched his room but found nothing suspicious. A detective asked him if he had been wearing an overcoat, to which Mahmood replied that he had. They looked at his coat and noted that it was damp. They also noted that it had been raining that evening. They then left to continue their inquiries elsewhere. The following day, a Jamaican man named Harold Cover came forward and gave the police a statement. He said he had seen a man leaving Lily Volpert's shop, describing him as a Somalian with a gold tooth. The detective asked Mr. Cover if the man had been wearing an overcoat and a hat, to which Mr. Cover replied that the man had not been wearing either of these items. A week after the murder, pressure was mounting on the police to solve the case. They did not seem to have made much headway into finding the culprit. The story was dominating the press and was a main topic of conversation in the city. Things changed, however, when Lily Volpert's family offered a £200 reward for information that could help the police find the person responsible for the terrible crime. Somewhat inevitably, a well-known police informer named May Gray suddenly came forward. She told the police that on the 6th of March, Mahmood Hussein Mattan came into her shop to buy second-hand clothes. She said he had rolls of banknotes on his person, which was strange, as she knew the gentleman, and he usually didn't have very much money. With this new information, the police again questioned Mahmood, but he stuck to his story that he had not been in Bute Street that day. He told them again that he had gone to the cinema, not leaving until around 7:30 p.m, and then he went home. The police had witnesses who were in and around the shop on Thursday the 6th of March, but all seemed to contradict each other's accounts of who was in the area at the time. Lily Volpert's sister had confirmed that she had seen a black man at the shop door moments before the crime was committed. She said his head nearly touched the door frame, which suggested that the man was about 6 foot tall. The police went back to Mahmood's house on the 15th of March. They again searched his room and arrested him on the charge of stealing a raincoat. He then appeared in court the same day and was remanded in custody. The police had been making detailed investigations into the suspect and had become aware that he seemed to have more money than usual in the days following the crime, but he was still living in his small room in Davies Street, and the police had not found him to be in possession of large amounts of cash. He was also not a tall man, so could not have been the person that Lily Volpert's sister had seen in the doorway of the shop. They placed him in 2 lineups, hoping that someone would be able to identify him, but no one was able to pick him out. A 12-year-old girl had reported that she had seen the victim answer the door of her shop to a tall black man with a moustache just after the store had closed. When she was asked to identify the man in an identity parade, the only person in the lineup was Mahmood. However, she said that he was definitely not the man she had seen. The police then decided she could not be a very credible witness. At 5:30 p.m. on Sunday the 16th of March, 1952, the police charged Mahmood Hussein Mattan with Lily Volpert's murder. They theorised that Mahmood had entered the shop while Lily Volpert was occupied assisting two female customers. He then stayed out of sight, and when the ladies left and Miss Volpert closed the shop, he attacked her. The theory seemed a little strange, and the evidence was very sparse. There were no eyewitnesses who could actually put him at the shop at the time of the murder, and Harold Cover had said that he had seen a Somalian man with gold teeth and not wearing a hat or an overcoat. Mahmood didn't have any gold teeth, and on the 6th of March had been wearing a hat and an overcoat. Even the detective who searched his property on the day noted that his coat was damp. No one identified him at the identity parade, even though he was the only person there. It seemed all the police had to go on were two tiny spots of blood found on his second-hand shoes and two very questionable witness statements made by Harold Cover and May Gray. The trial of Mahmood Hussein Mattan began in Swansea in July 1952 and lasted for 3 days. His command of English was okay, but far from perfect, and he had never been offered a translator, either while being interviewed by the police or at his trial. The prosecution's case was purely based on witnesses who allegedly had seen the defendant on the 6th of March in areas that would mean it was possible he could have been at the crime scene at the time of the murder. Their main witness was Harold Cover, who had given the police 2 statements, the second of which was totally different to the first. The police, however, never disclosed to the defence team the fact that after the victim's family had offered a £200 reward for information that led to the conviction of the person responsible, Harold Cover had changed his statement. They also had not notified the defence of the 4 other people who had been in or near the shop on the night of the murder, who had all failed to pick out the defendant at an identity parade, including a 12-year-old girl who had insisted that the defendant was definitely not the man that she had seen on the night in question. Throughout the trial, the prosecution called many witnesses, all who seemed to give contradictory evidence. The police also failed to produce any evidence that Mahmood had committed the crime, despite searching his property on different occasions. The defence lawyers, however, did not do a very good job of defending their client, and during the 3-day trial, it often seemed that they were working more for the prosecution. They failed to call any character witnesses, and Mahmood's wife, Laura, did not give evidence in his defence. She was advised that her testimony would not be relevant, but her mother took the stand and confirmed that at 8 p.m. on the 6th of March, she had been speaking to Mahmood on the doorstep of her home at 8 Davies Street, which was 2 miles from where the crime took place, so he therefore could not have conceivably travelled to Bute Street by 8:15 p.m. 2 other witnesses also said that he was with them at number 42 Davies Street a little after 8:30. When the defence lawyer gave his closing speech, he made derogatory comments about the defendant, comments that were far more likely to have prejudiced the jury against Mahmood, rather than persuade them that he was innocent and should be acquitted. On the 24th of July 1952, the trial ended, and the jury was sent out to deliberate. When they returned, they found the defendant, Mahmood Hussein Mattan, guilty of the murder of Lily Volpert. The judge then passed the mandatory sentence of death by hanging. Mahmood believed in the British justice system and never actually thought that he would hang. He was sure that the person responsible would be caught and that he would be freed. However, on the 19th of August, his leave to appeal was refused, and on the 3rd of September 1952, Mahmood Hussein Mattan was hanged at Cardiff prison. He was the last person to be hanged in Wales. Laura and the family refused to believe that Mahmood had been responsible for the crime and were determined to clear his name. It was revealed that in 1950, 2 years before Lily Volpert was found dead in her shop, Harold Cover had been taken to court after attacking a man with a broken bottle. Strangely, Mahmood's defence lawyers had failed to look into whether any of the prosecution witnesses had any previous criminal convictions. In 1967, Harold Cover was fined £23 for causing grievous bodily harm to his own 19-year-old daughter, and on May the 6th, 1969, he was sentenced to life imprisonment for attempting to murder his 18-year-old daughter by attacking her with a razor. The similarity of this offence and the attack on Miss Volpert in 1952 was striking. It was also pointed out that Harold Cover had a moustache at the time, unlike Mahmood, and the witnesses who said they saw a man at the shop all described him as having a moustache. A lady who still lived in the area, who was 20 years of age in 1952 and who had never previously been interviewed by the police, said that it was Harold Cover who she had seen at the entrance of the shop at 8:05 p.m. on the night of the murder. The conviction of Mahmood Hussein Mattan had been based almost solely on Harold Cover's statement. Although the case was assessed in 1969, it was not until 1997 that it was actually reviewed by the newly formed Criminal Cases Review Commission. After looking at the evidence, they sent it to the Court of Appeal, and on the 24th of February 1998, the guilty verdict passed down to Mahmood was quashed. The judge said that the conviction was demonstrably flawed. The body of Mahmood Hussein Mattan was exhumed from its resting place in Cardiff prison and moved to a Cardiff cemetery. The epitaph on the gravestone reads, "Killed by injustice." His wife Laura died 10 years later, in 2008, having seen her husband's name cleared. Hello everyone, and thank you so much for listening.